What's up, friends? Dan Vega here, Spring Developer Advocate at VMware. Today, we're going to be talking about Spring Boot 3.2. It was recently released, and I'm going to have a bunch of content coming up on it because there are really a lot of great features and some things I want to dive deeper into. But today, what we're going to do is build an application that talks to an API, and we're going to talk to that API using the new REST client feature in Spring Boot 3.2. Now, this was something that was built into Spring Framework 6.1, but Spring Boot 3.2 adds auto configuration for this and makes it really easy to get started with it. So today I'm going to be talking to the ConvertKit API. It's the newsletter subscription service I use. If you don't use it, don't worry about it. Just consider it an API. You may have another API that you talk to. I still think you get a lot of value out of this, and we're going to do something fun with this. I'll show you a neat little feature in this service I found to basically wire up a UI for me for the front end of it. With that, let's jump over to the browser. I got to show you a couple things. All right, so here we are on my website, danvega.dev. If you follow me, you know I've been talking a lot about it lately. I recently kind of rebuilt it and rebranded it. So if you want to, go ahead and check it out. But the reason I'm pointing you to this is because at the time of this recording, my latest newsletter is on Spring Boot 3.2, VMware by Broadcom, and conference planning in 2024. So if you want to read my highlights on Spring Boot 3.2, a little bit what happened over Thanksgiving here in the US, and just some of the features there, some updates on VMware by Broadcom, and some conference planning that I'm putting together for 2024, sign up for my newsletter. It's free. You get some great info out of it, and I'm really enjoying writing. So go ahead and check that out. Now, what we're talking about today is Spring Boot 3.2. So we're going to build a newsletter application. This application is going to require a front end, just a simple landing page where you can put in an email address, submit it, and then we'll submit to the ConvertKit API to basically add to a form. So before we get to the front end, let's kind of fill out some information about what we're going to do here. So I'm on start.spring.io. I'm going to pick Maven, the latest version, which is 3.2.0. I'm going to say dev.danvega. We'll call this newsletter. And actually, I think I have one called newsletter already. So let's call this CK newsletter. And we'll pick Java 21. We're not actually using anything Java 21 specific yet, but we are going to as we start talking more about 3.2. And all I need here is Spring Web. And this is important. We're going to talk about this. What does this bring us? What are we going to get out of the box with this? We're going to do some cool things here with Spring Boot 3.2 and Spring Web. So generate that. We'll open this up in an IDE or text editor in a minute. But first I want to show something off. The repo for this, as always, you can find in the description below. This has all the code we're going to go through. But to do the front end, I'm using this service called TLDraw. And this is something similar to Excalidraw, which I use a lot. But they have a new feature that I thought I'd just kind of show off today. And it's this make it real feature. Now, the reason I'm not doing this in real time is because I've done this like 10 times and come up with 10 different results. But what this allows you to do is basically create a mockup. So I've created this mockup for this landing page that we're going to do today, saying, hey, this is a logo. Here's our text. Here's another logo, bite-sized Java, your weekly updates on everything happening in the Java ecosystem, a newsletter, and community by the real Dan Vega. Then there's an enter your email address input with a subscribe button. There's some latest posts. And actually, I am okay with us just going off the cuff here, and let's try this again. So I'm going to go ahead and say, I'm going to highlight all of this, and I'm going to click make it real. And what this is doing is this is using your Open API key. So you need Open API key to do this. And it's going to generate actual HTML using HTML and Tailwind CSS to create the UI for this mockup that you have. And I thought that was really cool. I've had some varying results, like different results here and there. But for the most part, it's like a really good way to get something off the ground, right? So here I have this. If I go ahead and bring this down and kind of open this up a little, you see this one's a little bit different. I have this logo, but now I have these latest posts, might have an image in them, a title, when it was written. So I really like this. So now what you can do is actually copy this code, and we'll use this in our Spring Boot app to create just a nice front end for our landing page. So with that, let's go ahead and open up our Spring application in our IDE or text editor. I'm going to use IntelliJ. You can use whatever you're most productive in, and we'll have some fun building this out. Let's go. All right, so the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to come over to the static folder, and this is where I'm going to create my index.html page. I'm going to paste in that code that I got from that TL draw. You can see bite-sized Java. Let's just check a couple things, though. I want to see from our form standpoint. We have form type email placeholder class. Required. I might put a name equals email in here, and I have a subscribe button. I don't have an action, which I think is okay. Right, we'll come back and fill that action in just a minute. So this is it. This is our page. I'm also going to create a simple thank you page. I'll copy this. You can just kind of copy this from the repo and paste this in. This is where they will land after they subscribe. So I'll call this thank you.html. And again, nothing much here. So we have our two static pages. We should be able to go ahead and run the application. We can see we've started up. We're using Spring Boot 3.2.0. Great to see. Let's head over to the browser and localhost 8080. Here is our application. We don't have a subscribe button there. Which is concerning. Let's go back to our UI and just see what we have here. So we have a button, submit, subscribe. What is going on there? It is there. It's just hard to see. So let's fix that. Text white, text black. Here, let's just go ahead and use the button that I had before in the previous iteration of this. Let's see if that works a little bit better. We got to go ahead and restart that. And now there's our subscribe button. We can fill in an email address, subscribe. Here's our latest posts. I think in the last version I did, I might have wrapped this in, say something with like a max width. So maybe I'll do that as well. Let's go back here and so around our main div, this is our main div, right? Max width auto. Let's just say max width, say 7XL, and then go ahead and restart this. That will just kind of clean it up a little, I think. Yeah, there we go. I like that a little bit better. Okay, so here's our index page. And then if we go to the thank you .html. There's our thank you for subscribing. We could obviously clean this up. This is less about that UI than anything. So we have our form here. We want to have an email address clicked in here. When you click subscribe, we will submit it to the ConvertKit API. Now, ConvertKit gives you some options for embedding forms on websites, but I often found that that comes with a lot of JavaScript, a lot of like code you have to embed in there. And I like clean forms. I like clean everything. So I like to go ahead and slim this down and just use my own form. This also gives me some other advantages on the Spring side. I may want to do something else with this email address. I might want to stick it in my own database. There are a number of reasons why I might want to do this. So I like go ahead and capture this email address. I can do whatever I need to do with it and then send it off to the ConvertKit API and have it subscribe to a form over there. So how are we going to make this work? Let's go in here. To do this, we're going to need, I think, a couple of things. If we were to jump into the ConvertKit API. I'm not going to, like I said, I'm trying to focus less on that API. I'm just kind of showing off an API to kind of emphasize some of the things I want to cover. But in that API, we're going to need a URL that we're going to hit and an API key. So these to me are ConvertKit basically properties. And what I want to do with these properties is I want to set up a record to hold them. So I'm going to say that this is going to be a ConvertKit properties class, and we'll have this as a record, and this will have a URL and a API key, right? And we will have this as a configuration properties with a prefix of ConvertKit. Okay, so with that in place, now I can go back to application and say enable configuration properties, ConvertKit properties.class. Now, if you notice something, I didn't have to go into my pom.xml and add the configuration processor stuff. Again, this is something that I believe IntelliJ is handling now for us, so we don't have to kind of add that extra dependency to get that in here, right? So now what I can do is I can go in and set up those properties. And the way that I'm going to do that is I'm going to just set my application.properties to YAML. So I'm going to say YAML. And in here, I'm going to define a couple of properties, right? Now I can come in and say ConvertKit, and you see we have an API key and a URL. So the URL is going to be api.convertkit.com/v3. And then the API key is going to be something else. This is where your secret key will go. And then I'm also going to, what I'm going to do is do a Spring config import. And I'm going to optionally import something called secrets.yaml. So what this allows me to do is here in this file, I'm going to say secrets.yaml. And now what I'll go off and do while I'm off screen is basically set this key, this API key, to my actual ConvertKit API key. If you don't have one, you can sign up for an API key on ConvertKit and get a free one for you. But I have an account with ConvertKit, so I can go into my account and get that. I'm going to do that. I'm going to off screen, put this in here. And then what I do is I git ignore this. So this won't get checked into Git, but this one will. So you'll see this in the final repo. So let me do that and come back. All right, now that we have that in place, I think we are in a good spot to start writing some Spring code here. So I'm going to create a new package. I'm going to call this forms. And inside of here, I'm going to create a new class called the forms controller. Now, the reason I'm naming this forms is, again, on the ConvertKit API side, there is a forms package, a forms section, and that's how you can say, hey, I want to subscribe this user, this email address to this particular form. You can create different forms in ConvertKit. So I'm going to call this the forms controller. I'm going to say that this is a REST controller. It's going to have a request mapping of /API/forms, and then we can start to do some things in here. So I'm going to get a logger just so I can go ahead and log some stuff out. I'm going to need those ConvertKit properties. So I'm going to say ConvertKit properties. We'll call this CK props. And then finally, I'm going to need a REST client. So I'm going to say private final REST client. And let's go ahead and get this through constructor injection. And now I need to set up a REST client. So I'm going to say this.REST client is equal to REST client.create. And then we need a base URL. So we could hard code this in, or we could just say ckprops.url. And now we have the URL that we are going to basically call using our REST client. Cool. So good start. Now I need to wait to go ahead and subscribe a user. So how are we going to do this? So I'm going to set up a new post mapping. So the API endpoint is going to be at /subscribe. And what we're going to do here is we will say that we are going to return a response entity. So response entity of type. Now here's where we need to set up a type. Actually, let's just set up a string for now and set it up as a string for now. And we'll call this subscribe. And this is going to take in a request body. So what is that request body going to look like? We're going to create a new record to basically hold whatever we need in this thing. And what I'm going to need, we'll call this a subscriber request. And we'll call that this Copilot is really on me right now. Let's go ahead and turn this off for right now. All right, so subscriber request, and let's go ahead and return null for now. So now we need to create this type. So I'm going to create a new record in here. And what is this going to look like? Basically, we need a email address. We need the form that the user is subscribing to. So I'll call this form ID. And then I need the API key. Now the API key I want in a specific format for when I'm sending it over to ConvertKit. So I'll say JSON property. I want it to look like API key, right? So that's it. That's our subscriber request. Given that, we should have everything we need to go ahead and send this over to ConvertKit. So I'm going to say log.info, and we're just going to say subscribe. And what are we subscribing? We are sending the body over, right? So let's figure out what body is going to look like. So body is going to be a new subscriber request. And basically what we're going to do is we're going to get the email address, the form ID, and the API key and populate those. So we get 2 of those from the subscriber request. So we would say, so first of all, those 2, the email address and then the form ID are going to come in through the subscriber request, but I'm creating a new one because this is immutable, right? This is a record. So I need to create a new record based on those 2 fields and then the API key that's coming from our CK props. So in this, I'll say whatever the email address is, whatever the form ID is, and then from CK props, I want you to go ahead and get the API key. So that's our body. And now we could start to use the REST client. So what I really love about the REST client in Spring Boot 3.2 is when I hit that, this is very simple for me to look at. This Fluent API, I know what methods are available to me. When I used to look at the REST template and I used to hit REST template dot, there are all of these methods and all of these overloaded methods, and I was really confused on which one to use. Here I know that I am sending a post request, so all I gotta do is say post. Now, what am I gonna do with that post? I'm going to send it to a particular URI that is, again, based on the ConvertKit API. And I guess I'll pop over to the documentation just real quick so you could see it. Here's where the documentation is. If you go to form and you want to add a subscriber to a form, basically we're just making a post request to this /forms, the form ID, and subscribe. We're sending it as JSON. We're sending the API key and the particular email address. What you get back is a subscription. Now, you could easily set up a subscription as a record type in the system and get that return. I'm just returning a string for now, just so we can keep this a little bit concise. So what does that mean from the URI standpoint? I'm going to say /forms. What is the ID? So the ID is going to be the CK props dot, what is this? Body. Oh, no, sorry, not CK props. Body dot form ID. And then we will say /subscribe. So that's where we're sending it to. We're sending this as JSON, so we're going to say media type application.json. We are going to say, hey, here's the body that I'm sending you. So we're sending that body, which is really just, I guess all we really care about is the email address, but we can just leave that. And what we want to do when we get it back is retrieve it, and we want to turn it into an entity. So we have a response entity that includes the response and like the status code. So to do that, I will just say, hey, turn it into an entity. What we get back is a string, and that's that. Now, again, if you wanted to set up a type for that subscription that comes back, so you could set up a type with ID, state, created at, etc., and you could turn it into that. So once that's there, then I'm just going to go ahead and say log.info. I'm going to say subscribe. And then what we're going to subscribe to is, here is the response. So, oh, did I not set the response here? So I can say response is equal to that. And now we'll log that out. And what I want to do is actually return that response. Cool. So that is that. I think that is going to work just fine. Now, the biggest thing that we need to do is back in our form. So if we go to index.html, I just don't have a form ID in here. And so I'm going to put a simple input type in, a hidden input type that includes the actual form on my ConvertKit side that I want to add this subscriber to. So I think that's it. Let's go ahead and reset this. Looks like everything started. I'm going to go back over here. I'm going to, oh, you know what I need to do is I'm going to pop in a little bit of JavaScript. So I don't think I want to talk through this. I'm just going to paste it in and we'll kind of cover it real quick. So we need to submit this form, right? Hey, go ahead and find the form. There's only one form on the page. Add an event listener to submit it. Go ahead and get the email and the form ID out. So we're looking at input type email, input name, form ID. So name, form ID, type equals email. There's only one of those. That's how it gets it. Sets up some data. It will use the fetch API to perform an action on that. Do we have an action here? So no, so we don't have an action. So we want to figure out exactly where we're sending this to. And in our case, we know that this is at /API/forms/subscribe. That is the route that we gave it in the forms controller. So /API/forms/subscribe. So that's our action. And that is what we are going to set the action to. We are posting this as JSON. We're stringifying the data. And then if we get an OK response, so remember that response entity will have a status code in there. If it's OK, we're going to send you over to the thank you page. If not, we're going to have an error of form submission failed. So now I think I can go ahead and restart this and let's see if this works. So I'm going to go ahead and reload this. And all I'm going to do is say danvega@gmail.com. I'm going to click subscribe. And there we go. We were sent off to our thank you page. And there you have it. A new application using Spring Boot 3.2, the new REST client with the auto configuration in it. And yeah, a lot of excitement around the new release. We're going to be talking a lot about Spring Boot 3.2 in the near term here. We're going to create a lot of content around that. So if there's something you're interested in seeing, please let me know. And again, I hope you enjoyed this. If you are not a ConvertKit user, don't worry about it. As I said, this could be whatever API that you're trying to connect with. Using the REST client makes it so much easier. And the reason we did it in 3.2 is we're going to take advantage of a lot of things. We're going to be talking about those. Again, I mentioned some of them in my newsletter. For me, Java 21 support, I know Project Loom and virtual threads are kind of the highlight, and rightfully so. But there are a lot of other things in Java 21 that you could take advantage of from a language level standpoint. And yeah, the REST client, the JDBC client are two big highlights for me in Spring Boot 3.2. So I'm excited to create some more videos around this. I hope you got something out of this. If you did, leave me a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and as always, happy coding, friends.